Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to LoFi History. This is Libba from behind the scenes today, and we have our lovely historians, Glen and Marie. Hello, Glen and Marie.
Hello.
And if this is your first time joining us, then welcome. During LoFi History, you get to ask our lovely historians, Marie and Glen, really any question that you like in history. They've got quite a wide breadth of knowledge. And I see that our regulars are already here, which is exciting. Welcome, everyone. I see that we've got Terry from Iowa. Hello, Terry.
Hello.
We've got Karen. Hey, Karen. Good to see you. And Josh is here as well, as usual, I should say. So welcome back, Josh. Who else do we have in the chat so far? Oh, wonderful. Oh, Olivia is also here. Oh, very cool. So we've got some questions already in the chat, but if this is your first time joining us, then do feel free to chat any history question that you like. And we always like to start off with what Glen and Marie are wearing. But Glen, did you have something to share?
No, I was going to say, you keep saying that we'll answer any history question they have. We've been doing this for almost 2 years now. Do you think maybe we should open it up to career or relationship advice too?
No. Unless it's like
it's history related, relationship
Yes.
or career advice.
Yeah, if you want to, in fact, I know Marie knows all about Victorian courtship traditions. Yes. If you want to go old school with,
it is Valentine's month after all.
This is true. So if you have any questions about, I know that Marie is also pretty well aware of the general history of Valentine's Day and other courtship customs and such. Glen, have you studied much about Valentine's Day or love through the ages?
I know about the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Great.
And I know about romantic courtly love in the medieval period.
Now that's pretty fun.
That's some stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that sounds like a great jumping off point, especially since both of you could be dressed for, Glenn, it looks like you're dressed for a good old-fashioned medieval date, and Marie, we'll find out what era you are from. But yeah, we always like to start off with what Glenn and Marie are wearing. So why don't we start off with Marie? In fact, I see you have a beautiful tiara on as well.
Thank you. I know, I've realized, I'm like, oh, it's green. I was slightly wasn't
Oh,
sure
that's
if it was
funny. I
going
guess
to
it
show
just
up.
we can still see it.
But okay, I guess you can still see the outline
It's
of
so
it.
glittery.
Yeah. So I decided I was thinking, oh, it's Valentine's Day. Gotta go with like the theme. So I was like, well, what do I have that's pink or red in my costume wardrobe? And I ended up deciding on this lovely kind of like pinkish mauve ball gown, and it is from about late 18 teens, early 1820s, kind of going into the 20s there as my the empire hits its like zenith of like not even being a waste but just existing in like 1815, and then it slowly works its way back down until you hit like it keeps going down until you hit the 1840s, where basically it's over, like the waistline is actually on your hips. But yes, this one's really fun, and you can't see it, and even if I stand up, I don't know if you'd be able to see it, but I have fun like almost what is beginning to be called hem sculpture on the bottom of my dress. And that's like a hallmark of the 1820s and going into the 1830s, is you have these like elaborate fabric poofed designs on the bottom of your dress, but also I have these fun little sleeve caps, which I like. And of course you have you're going to a ball or something, so you got your long gloves on, cause fancy. And then I was feeling a little, so people did wear tiaras, but also I was feeling a little Bridgerton inspired as well, cause they always wear tiaras in Bridgerton for no apparent reason. But you have to have the sparkly tiara. So I decided that I also needed one.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Karen says, my waistline has moved too.
You're in fashion.
Exactly. Now, before we get to Glenn, we do have some fashion questions for Marie. And one of them is about an accessory of the fan.
Yes.
So, Marie, do you know anything about courtship signals with a fan?
Oh, okay. So, in gift shops across America at historic sites, they sell these wooden sandal fans, and they have the language of the fan attached to them. Now, that is one of those things that seemed like it might have existed, but would have been very complicated to actually carry out. But a lot of, if you look at etiquette books of the time, there is no historical evidence for the language of the fan truly existing. Now, did people use the fan to flirt? Of course. You know, you gotta like, you know, slowly fan and like make eyes at each other across the room. So was it a flirtation tool? Yes. Now, if you're referring exactly to like the language of the fan,
You'd have more luck with semaphore.
now that did exist. They're all throughout the Civil War.
Yes.
And military conflicts before, or you know, Morse code, things like that. Dropping a hanky has been a classic. Dropping your fan. So like there are things that people did, and then I think basically like what we love to do with the Victorians, we make up weird stuff that they did, and like the Victorians did with medieval people, they made up weird stuff medieval people did. It's not actually true. We just kind of like ascribing weird things to old people. So yeah, the language of the fan doesn't truly exist. So therefore, I'm not sure if I can answer your question.
Well, it seems like you could make up your own language of the fan now.
Of course, why not? You can make up anything you want.
Exactly. No, that's
Please don't
fine.
say historical people did it if they didn't.
Yes, exactly. Now, Glenn, when it comes to medieval times and courtship, I mean, what would have, especially as you're dressed as what today? Tell us about how
This is just medieval everyman, right? It's a linen tunic under a wool tunic with a wool hood and a linen cap and a belt. Unlike many of my other outfits, though, I made this one. Because
nice.
medieval clothes are pretty easy. So easy that Glen can do them. They're just a series of triangles and squares mostly. So, you know, the hood, the cap is really easy. It's just a linen cap. Right, and you sort of a mirror image thing. You
Got
can
two
get the.
pieces of leather, or do you have one in? Sorry, not
I've got
linen. Or do you have like
I've got the
you
little.
have a
I've got
strip
the
in
little middle
Okay,
piece.
nice,
Because
fancy.
otherwise they don't really fit. And then I've got my a cool hood.
Oh, that's so
You gotta
fun.
show them the leer pipe.
And then you can do like this.
Oh,
You can
yeah.
bring it up there. You can do all the fun things. You can do the lyre pipe that is so long.
Now, is that just for fun? Why?
It is just for fashion. That's all it's for.
All this extra fabric, me.
Yeah, so why? There are cool period pictures of it so long that it's tucked into the belt
Oh,
in the
wow.
back to keep it from dragging on the ground because it's expensive.
Yeah.
So this is very typical. Oh, the word peasant is a loaded term when you come to medieval period because time and place can change the relationships between the lower and the middle and the upper classes. It's so complicated. Glen's second rule of history: everything is complicated. But this outfit is usually around this represents sort of a early to mid 14th century, so 1300 to 1350 look. And, you know, marriage and things at that time were very dependent upon class and how things went. The lower to middling classes are going to marry for love as often as not. It's not an arranged marriage sort of thing. The women could choose who they marry depending upon, again, the time and the place you're talking about.
And then their general family and social economic situation.
Right, yeah. Then they're working together. Their trades. They're agricultural workers. A yeoman would actually own his own piece of land and could work that, which would make him slightly more eligible bachelor
Got
material.
your own land.
Oh.
Yeah, you can make your own money. You can have your own pigs. And decide what to do with the pigs. The further up the social scale you go, the women actually have less say in who they're going to marry and when they're going to marry. There's this myth that that boys and girls both married at absurdly young ages in the royalty and nobility to secure those alliances. There's a couple of instances of children being betrothed at like 13, 14. That is by far the very, very rare exception.
That's
Yeah.
also just betrothed, not actually married.
Right,
Ah,
right.
I
But that's
see.
not the same.
But yes, but the higher up in the social classes you go, the more likely than not the marriages were going to be arranged on the woman's behalf, and sometimes the man's behalf as well. And the courtship could be very formal in those upper classes. We will send portraits to each other, and then we'll meet, and then it'll be supervised, and then a year's worth of things go back and forth, until the marriage, and then you're done.
Because some people got catfished with those portraits.
See, Henry
That's a
VIII.
good point.
But the lower to middling sorts, it was very much as you would imagine courtship now, since affection was more often than not involved. They might fall in love with someone. Remember that, let's pick England, for example.
Yeah.
England at this time, because that's the easy one. People are going to be even the yeoman farmers who own their own piece of land are still going to be very tied down geographically. There's, by and large, not going to be a lot of travel that happens. So you're going to become interested in and marry within a certain geographic pool of the opposite sex. Going to church, going to market. Markets were a very popular way to socialize and make money. So and you had to get married. You had to go to a church and get married. Pre-marriage pregnancies were incredibly common in the medieval period, which of course would lead to the requirement of getting married, but that was also gained by certain young people, because if they wanted to get married but there was some resistance to it, there were things they could do to arrange so that it had to be done.
I see.
So it was it's not like everything else. It varies time, place, personal interactions, personal desires. But it is very fascinating. And of course, the lower and middling classes we know less about, because less people wrote from them and for them and about them.
Right.
The courtly stuff, the courtly love, there's tons of troubadour stories and this was that, but personally I find that way less interesting than the everyday yeoman, regular old people getting married, falling in love.
And what that brings to mind is our upcoming homeschool day, all about daily life in medieval Europe. Now, if you are a homeschool family, we can show you a little slide here. We have our upcoming homeschool day on Thursday, February 23rd. And this is from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this is all about daily life in medieval Europe. And of course, this is designed for homeschool families. But hey, if you've got Thursday free, then this is included with admission, this program. Marie, why don't you talk about a little bit of what people can expect when they visit?
Yes, so we are focusing, just like Glenn was saying, on daily life. What was life like for those common everyday folks? So Glenn will be out here in this outfit. Come see it in person, and be talking about what a yeoman farmer be doing? What is life like that? I will be doing food ways. So come and eat some what Glenn describes as awful black bread, which is as close as we can get to the medieval. Right?
It's actually not bad. It's just not the bread we're used
it's
to.
Not modern.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then also, cheese was a huge thing in medieval Europe. I know more about cheese than I thought I would.
Oh, if there's cheese at this, I think many people will be sold.
There will be cheese. Come and taste medieval cheese. Cheese that they ate in the Middle Ages.
Replica reproduction
Yes,
of
right?
medieval cheese.
Yeah, we've
not-
been aging it
It
for
is
a long
not
time.
actually from the 1300s. I should make
Although that would
clear.
be really cool, I gotta say.
Whew, I'm just thinking about, I feel like we might have to make people sign waivers.
Yeah, right.
Yes, but there will be cheese. We'll be making stew. Come and see, and also just think about all of the things in medieval Europe. You might be thinking oh yes, potatoes. No, we didn't have potatoes. That's from the New World. The New World has not been, the quote-unquote New World has not been discovered yet by Europeans. So it's just so interesting to dive into life like that. We'll be touching a little bit about religious life, come and hear some of the chants and songs that monks would have recited and sung. We'll have a touch table, which means you get to touch things.
Woo!
It'll be fun.
Nice.
Oh yes,
yeah.
and toys and games and what children would have done in the Middle Ages. So we'll have fun activities for everybody.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. And we'll give you more details on upcoming events because we got a lot of stuff going on. But we've got a lot of questions in the chat. And I also wanted to welcome some newcomers, at least to today's stream. We have, Karen Owen. We have 2 Karens. So hello, Karen. And we also have Laura is here. Hey, Laura, good to see you. And Phil is here. Hey, Phil. And we also have Richard.
Hello.
Hey, Richard. Good to see you. Excellent. So glad to have everyone. So we're going to start off with Karen A's question, Karen on Facebook. And Karen is wondering about the first ever conspiracy theory. Now, I mean, I don't know if we could actually... I am pretty positive that we've been conspiring against each other for since the dawn of time, but... when it comes to early conspiracy theories, like, that really caught on in a culture, what comes to mind for you guys? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be, like, ancient. Just what comes to mind when it comes to conspiracy theories of history? And maybe we'll keep going back further and further to find out what it is.
Let's see.
And of course, perhaps as usual, we should define our terms.
Yes, what do you mean by conspiracy theory?
By conspiracy theory, we're going to go with good old Merriam-Webster's definition of a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. So secretive and unlawful. What comes to mind for you guys?
But it doesn't have to be not untrue.
I don't think so. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay, so
It is
just a conspiracy.
Yes, to conspire. Now, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, wouldn't the American Revolution kind of be a conspiracy in a sense? But,
in a way.
But when it comes to conspiracy theory, I think
also,
that kind of changes the context a little bit because that's more of the dictionary says
More of a they're out to get us, man.
Yeah, so it says a belief that some secret but influential organization is responsible for an event or phenomenon. So yeah, does anything specific come to mind? I'm gonna do a little digging on YouTube while y'all give some thought.
I'm going back to Thucydides.
Oh wow, for that far.
If we're going way back. Because there were at least in Athens, the Eleusinian mysteries, which are so mysterious that they never wrote them down, so we don't know exactly what they were. But they were so important from a cultural and religious standpoint that they were considered sacred. And there was a secret group that would often meet, led by old Alcibiades, who was accused of mocking the Eleusinian mysteries and like having the ancient Athenian Greek equivalent of black masses to mock these very sacred and culturally relevant mysteries. And that got him in a lot of trouble, and people started to accuse him and the group of things. It was him being involved in the Eleusinian mysteries that led to Socrates' association with him that was used as evidence to condemn Socrates to death for being a part of mocking the Eleusinian mysteries. Was that why Socrates was truly condemned to die by the Athenian democracy? That could be a cool conspiracy. What were these mysteries? How was he involved? What did Alcibiades say? Who knew what, when? That's my take on it.
No, I think that's a pretty old one. Yeah, I dig that.
I don't think I can think older. I was thinking Knights Templar have a lot of mysteries and such surrounding them. Some of which are probably perhaps more modern in origin than actual medieval.
I don't buy any of those secret Templar gold hoard things.
Oh yeah.
But see, you don't have to buy them for them to be conspiracy theories.
Yeah, so
that's true.
There you go.
Like, you don't have to believe it, but it is a conspiracy theory.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so those are two pretty interesting ones that I think you could dive into and still glean a lot about the culture and the people who may have like believed these or even created them to some degree. So that's a pretty cool topic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. That's awesome. Now, next question comes from Olivia. And Olivia says, hey, y'all. In my history class, we are finishing the Gilded Era and moving
Glen's
into
favorite.
yes, and moving into the Progressive area. And we were discussing Boss Tweed. Now, I know a little bit about Boss Tweed, but Olivia's asking about any opinions on him.
I mean, he is. We were just talking about this in my class last week. He is the epitome of corrupt Gilded Age city government, right? Vote for me and mine, and I will make sure that y'all get what y'all need. I will pad your pockets. Here's the thing, though. In that period, politics was very local. Nowadays, most people only vote in a national presidential election because that's what we think is the most important. The national level is the most important thing in our lives politically. Not so in the Gilded Age. In the Gilded Age, it was all local, which is why the local bosses like Boss Tweed had so much power and influence. Because when you voted locally, it was going to determine what jobs you had, how much you were going to get paid, what city-funded services were going to come to the tenement or tenements where you and your people lived, which job, which place was going to get the new trolley to go back and forth between the places of work. So while, yes, it was corrupt and they were literally buying votes and trying to get people, vote for me and I will give your community everything that you want, that was the only way a lot of those communities could get anything done for them, was to operate within that system. So, and Boss Tweed took advantage of that better than anyone else. It's not like he just sat in New York City Hall and took the money in and smoked cigars and twirled his mustache. He took the money in and he fixed elections, but while he was in there, he got stuff done. If he made a quote unquote campaign promise, the campaign promise went through.
That's rare.
That is, that's interesting.
But it was as corrupt as can be the way he did it.
Now, what you see on the screen here, I mean, speaking of the corruption, the very famous illustrator Thomas Nast was quite well known for creating these caricatures and cartoons of Boss Tweed. One of the more famous ones is this one where his head is a money bag. I wonder what that means. But these were very influential. Glenn, I know you got to learn a little bit more about this, but I mean, was this a kind of unique situation for a cartoonist to have such a huge impact on someone who is a corrupt official? Not
really. The media has always had vast influence on public opinion, right? And this is the time period where literacy, the literacy rates were exploding. Amongst the electorate, they were getting news wherever they could get it, and the newspapers were providing it to them. Every newspaper in this time period was political in one way or the other. They supported certain political parties or certain political bosses and fought against the other ones, and other newspapers would do the opposite. So their job was not only to influence public opinion so that their political party or group got into power, it was also to sell newspapers. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And to combine those two, you want to have something that appeals to your readers. And while reading articles is one thing, the human mind loves looking at pictures of stuff, right? Since the Lascaux cave paintings, they like looking at pictures of stuff. And when you can combine a picture of something in a way that transmits a very complex set of information and opinions with a single image, that is a true art form. And that is something that Nast was able to do. And this time period sort of brought all those things together. Rising literacy, huge, gigantic newspaper sales brought about by the mechanization of the publishing system, and this desire for news in a politically active yet corrupt society.
Now, Olivia mentioned that this is during the Gilded Age, going into the Progressive era. I mean, what's the context of all of this happening? I mean, generally from like the 1870s or so to the early 1900s. This is there's a lot going on.
That's
a lot.
That's so much.
Is it too much? All right, we'll have to do
that's
a
too
program.
much.
When you think just Gilded Age,
yeah.
The term Gilded Age basically comes from this idea of things being gilded in gold.
Yes.
Which, when you think about what gilding is, it doesn't mean that the thing is gold. It means the thing is covered in gold. So the Gilded Age basically refers to this big, beautiful aristocracy, American aristocracy in air quotes, because we don't actually have like nobles, but essentially these super filthy rich people who are making their wealth, but it's because of all of this social political turmoil, like the incredible rampant just terribleness of terrible working conditions, child labor, the environment's going like, no, why kill all the birds for hats? But, all of these, like, terrible things are happening. But also, there's a certain class of people getting ridiculously wealthy. Yeah. That way...
And the distance between them is growing.
Yes. So when you think Gilded Age, you think of this beautiful, not incredibly progressive, but just, like, fast-track society of a lot of invention and stuff. But also, it's this Gilded Age. It's covering all of those terrible things in this sparkly golden beautifulness.
And the social and political reaction to that is what leads into the progressive era.
Which is trying to fix all that.
Which is trying to fix it.
Oh, I really like that. I didn't realize.
Sometimes the cure is worse than the disease.
I see. So it would be interesting to dive into the Gilded Age, but also kind of compare and contrast that to where does it go into the progressive era. So excellent. Thank you so much, Olivia, for your question. And speaking of questions, if you would like to go ahead and chat your questions, we do have a nice little queue that we've got, but if we don't get to them today, then we will definitely get them next time. We keep your questions. Now, Karen asks, can we ask Juliette Gordon-Lowe what a Girl Scout would do for Valentine's? And I was thinking about this, and I am positive that they would have made Valentine's crafts as a troop. I'm sure they would have done some kind of community service in connection to that. But when I was trying to find any actual documentation or anything online of like, this is what they did in Juliette Lowe's era of the early 1900s, I wasn't able to come up with anything specific, but it would very much surprise me if they did not do something as a troop, whether that was a community service or creating their own cards for their loved ones. That would certainly be in line with one of the crafts that they would do, because of course Girl Scouts, they're committed to service. But they're also going to be learning new skills, and a lot of the fun ways that Juliette Lowe would teach them these new skills is going to be through fun, interactive activities and hands-on activities like creating cards for each other. So you might be practicing your calligraphy or your handwriting while making these really beautiful cards. But I love that question. Thank you for posing it. And I want to do a little more research on that. That's a great question, though. Now, our next question comes from Laura, and Laura asks, did the Korean and Vietnam Wars actually accomplish anything? That's a big question.
Yes.
With a short answer. So the short answer is yes. Now, let's just talk about what was the greatest, the best, like in the most positive light, and then we can talk about the other side of things. But let's talk about the Korean War, which happens before Vietnam, so we'll just start there. The Korean War, how did we benefit from that as a country?
So, okay. World War II happens.
Boom.
The communist Soviet Union quickly goes from being our ally to our enemy, because communist ideology says we have to go to make every country communist and topple their governments. That's fairly aggressive. Fairly aggressive. In 1949, we lose China, quote unquote, to the communists. So all of China also becomes communist. And to the Americans and the still very much recovering countries of Western Europe, we see a giant red blob on that side of the globe, which is the threat of communism. So we decide that we have to do something. Little tiny North Korea also is communist because the Soviets had moved in there at the very end of World War II to take over from the occupying Japanese forces and made North Korea communist. North Korea, acting more or less on its own, decides that it wants to make South Korea communist too. So it invades the South. The South is unprepared and depends mostly on the United States, but also the United Nations. So here are the two things the Korean War accomplishes. Let me sum up. But skip to the end. We at least defend South Korea, and we force North Korea to sign not a peace treaty, but a ceasefire that preserves the independence of South Korea to this very day, and it is a very prosperous country. So number one, it preserves the sovereignty and independence of South Korea, which is one of the most prosperous and happy places to live in all of Asia today, number one. Number two, it showed that the new United Nations could actually accomplish peacekeeping efforts to keep things from scrambling out of control and to defend against aggressor nations. The League of Nations back in 1918 had no power to do anything. It could basically say stop, or I'll say stop again. Whereas the United Nations Charter actually allowed military action to prevent things and to carry out the will of the United Nations. So it did serve as a positive test of the United Nations mandate. So that was considered a very positive thing.
We also got MASH.
Which, I mean, come on,
One
that's way
One could
more
argue that MASH we got from the Vietnam War.
Yes, but it's set in Korea.
It's set in Korea.
So if we didn't have Korea, then we couldn't have it set.
I guess.
Because I know it's like really about Vietnam, but it's set in Korea, so you couldn't have MASH without Korea.
That's true.
And so going into Vietnam, I mean, Marie, if you want to jump in with your opinion on, I mean, I know that's a huge, huge
very
topic,
complicated.
but what is the benefit either culturally? I mean, because I'm also thinking like when I've overheard y'all discussing Vietnam and I've learned a little bit about it, like something that keeps coming back is that this is a time when the media really showed war and almost
Vietnam was
instantly.
the first war that really you could watch in your living room. My granny remembers, basically, talking to my pap and saying like, oh, well, we can go watch the war on TV tonight. We'll turn on and watch the war. And you have the beginning of anti-war sentiments in America, more so than you had at any other time in its history. Of course, there are always people who are opposing war, but you can make an argument that the Vietnam War was probably the most resistance that you would have to the United States getting involved in a foreign conflict once they're already pretty involved in the conflict. They want people to end and to go home. And you also have a very large protest movement where you have it all coincides. There's so many things that people are unhappy with. So you have civil rights weaving in there. You have third wave feminism weaving in there. You have the protest movement because people are getting drafted to go to this thing that they don't want to go to. And essentially it's, and then also we have inflation starting to rise and wages starting to freeze. So you also have some labor activists who are also very unhappy, and this all kind of coincides in this boiling pot of like the Vietnam conflict where people can kind of just focus their energy and anger into this thing at the government. When we have, this accomplishes not great things for the U.S. In terms of just community sentiment, but when you have essentially Vietnam being kind of the first war that America loses, it accomplishes shaking America's confidence in itself and this idea that America is unstoppable and a world power, and starts to make them really question like, hey, are we as great as we think we are?
It's been 50 years and the demons of Vietnam are still haunting the States to this day. And
when it comes to like was there the accomplishments in any kind of positive light from y'all's opinion? I mean, in a sense, I was thinking like people being more aware and in the know with that information. While it does bring them to that boiling point, it does seem like something that is maybe.
But I don't really feel like
I
the
don't
war
know.
accomplished that. The
Yeah,
media accomplished and technology accomplished that.
That's
Now,
a good point.
there-
via
Yeah.
the war.
There is a
Yeah.
huge Vietnamese immigrant community that came to the United States
Oh yeah.
and escaped the soon-to-be communist North Vietnamese forces. That is a very significant population. Every one of them came here because they wanted to get out from the control of North Vietnam, and they consider America's efforts worthwhile.
Right. I think that's
And
probably
that's a significant
I think so.
a significant view, but it is
Yeah.
certainly in the minority view, because all the things going on, right? I think Vietnam is sort of the catch-all for all the things that were going on in the 60s. There are domestic issues, there are racial issues. We've got the Pentagon Papers where confidence in the U.S. government is at an all-time low for a variety of things. People are getting drafted to go fight in a war that they don't believe in.
People are getting assassinated left and right, and
Yeah.
people are just very upset.
It's very interesting. Conscription for the United States Army ended in 1973. When that happened, the frequency of protest against the Vietnam War dropped by 90% on college campuses.
Wow.
that was all the college-age people.
That's what they were worried about.
They're very worried about.
I would be worried about that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But once they were safe, they didn't give a crap what happened over there.
They're like, well, I don't have to volunteer to go over
That's
there.
right. Who
so-
cares?
But that is a really interesting point about the Vietnamese immigration here to the United States, and that being, I'm sure there's a lot of positives to that as well. So
Right.
that's a good perspective. Yeah.
It's a very good, fantastically complex question.
Yes,
But-
which we appreciate. Thank
but
you.
worth looking into more. So I highly suggest
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
And you know what? I believe, am I right, that there is a small Vietnamese population here in Hall County?
In Gainesville, yeah,
in
there is.
Gainesville?
There
yeah,
is, yeah.
That would be really neat.
Oh,
to
From
yeah.
connect to that.
whose descent? Their
Yeah.
founding fathers did come over in like 74 to 75.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Laura. That made a really good connection for us locally here. So that's something we can definitely dig into. Awesome. So our next question comes from Josh, and of course, Josh is famous for his "what if" questions. So for Josh's "what if" today, this is: what if Lincoln didn't replace Hamlin with Johnson? Would Hamlin have continued Lincoln's goals and his legacy? Hannibal Hamlin was Lincoln's vice president from 60 to 64, for context. Now,
Yes. I think so, but Hamlin, if I'm remembering correctly, Joshua, and I'm no vice presidential scholar, but if I'm remembering correctly, Hamlin was much more closely aligned with Lincoln's political outlook than Johnson was.
Well, because he put Johnson on the ticket to kind of try to keep the country together, right?
To keep Tennessee, to get the Tennessee vote too.
it seems that I'm just reading a little bit about Hamlin, and I'll just go ahead and share what I'm Googling myself. Good old Wikipedia says that he was a strong abolitionist, which is interesting. So that's going to align somewhat with Abraham Lincoln, especially later in the war. It says, although not a close friend of the president, he lent loyal support to his key projects, such as the Emancipation Proclamation. So here we have a photo of him by the famous photographer Matthew Brady. But yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say on whether he would have gone through with his legacy or what.
It's a good because this is a what if question. So let's dig into this.
Yeah.
Him being a very strong, I think in his heart Lincoln was an abolitionist, but he was also running for president, which means he had to moderate a lot of things for public consumption.
Yeah.
His vice presidential candidate could embody those abolitionist views within the administration without having the lead guy have to put that out.
Yeah.
That being said, I wonder, Josh, if here's what I'm going to say. Because Hamlin was much more of an abolitionist and much more of an equal rights kind of person, let's say once Lincoln was assassinated and Hamlin becomes president, he's probably going to wholeheartedly go in with the radical Republican Reconstruction plan in Congress. And so he may not be loyal to Lincoln's way of thinking. He may have actually gone ahead and leapfrogged. There was this big jumble with Johnson trying to stop the radical Republicans and their version of things. We would have bypassed that, and he probably would have been much more open to the radical Republicans' version of doing things.
That's what I'm reading right now. Hamlin was an ally of the Northern Radical Republicans.
I'm as smart as Wikipedia.
Yes.
Look at that, yeah.
Because Lincoln needed radical Republican support to get the Republican ticket because he was far more of a moderate.
Right.
Or at least presented himself as one.
Yeah, he was trying to be one because that's how you get elected.
It is. Got appeal to the most people.
But yeah, and here's the thing though. When all is said and done, I don't think Reconstruction would have turned out differently because the radical Republicans did eventually get most of their way, and there was still just too much resistance amongst elite white Southerners to undo what Reconstruction was trying to accomplish. So I don't know that it would have turned out in the end any differently.
I do wonder, though, if perhaps they had taken more punishment in the form of executions of generals and such.
I think that would have led to a second rebellion.
Oh, yeah.
It could have easily.
Because that was...
But it also would have perhaps squashed more resistance, or the ability to form resistance.
Even most of the radical Republicans weren't in favor of executions, but they certainly were all about disenfranchisement and taking their property. I don't know. I think if Southerners saw a federal government coming in and wholesale impoverishing and disenfranchising entire swaths of the population, that could have gotten ugly. That could have gotten ugly.
Yeah.
Which probably would have made things worse because they would have turned their anger on the most geographically proximate enemy, which was the African American population, and they would have gotten even more violent than they already did.
Yeah,
which was very.
Which was very.
Right. Yeah, that's a good what if, Josh. You always bring some good things to contemplate. I really appreciate it. So let's see. Our next question comes from Richard. And Richard is one of our wonderful living history interpreters, just by the way. And let's see. Richard's question is, were the American people manipulated into World War I? Now, I wonder if you mean to serve in World War I? Oh, my God.
I think you mean like going into
the war?
It, like getting America physically into the war.
And, keyword manipulated. So I wonder what y'all think of that. Glen's short answer is yes. Now,
there was some backhandedness.
Wilson.
So, it's not all Wilson. It was also British intelligence.
Yes.
Well, give me some context because I don't even.
Okay. Yeah. So, World War I begins.
Boom.
1914. The United States declares itself neutral, and Wilson's big push is to be neutral.
Keep us out of war.
That was what he ran on, and in 1916, he kept us out of war. However, Wilson, in his heart, was always, if not anti-German, at least pro-Entente. The French and the British.
Had been giving aid.
And Russians. Not Soviets yet, but Russians.
Because the Russian Revolution happens during this time.
It's my favorite time period, Richard. How long do we have?
We got 15 minutes.
So, the United States, however, was vastly favorable towards the Entente. Private business loans had been going to the Entente to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. They had been shipping war material to the Entente, especially the British, which hacked the Germans off because it was a violation of neutrality. America constantly violated neutrality rules, and when Germany protested, they said, you shouldn't do that. And then when Germany torpedoes the Lusitania in violation of neutrality policy, all of a sudden, the United States freaks out.
And they're like, they attacked a passenger ship. A nice little passenger ship that definitely wasn't carrying weapons.
It was carrying weapons.
It was carrying weapons. They literally put
ammunition and rifles.
But of course, the people who had bought tickets on the Lusitania didn't know that. So the American government was also endangering civilians.
Right. So then Germany backed down because they didn't want the U.S. to come in, and then the Zimmermann telegram, which was sent secretly to the Mexican government from Germany, said, if you will come in on our side, we will send you arms and weapons. You can invade the South, the United States from the South, and get back, Texas and Arizona and New Mexico and parts of California. The British intercepted this because they're great at intelligence and breaking codes. And they held on to it for just the right time. And then they finally they sent it to Wilson and said, look, they're trying to get Mexico to attack you. And Wilson's like, look, they're trying to get Mexico to attack us. And then he goes to the United States Congress and asks for a declaration of war, not for conquest, but to make the world safe for democracy. And that it was the United States' duty to then intercede in the war. And at that point, most of the public opinion was behind it after the Lusitania, and after Wilson's Department of War information, whose job it was to disseminate perhaps slanted propaganda to the American people. So, yes, they were, but not nearly so much as they were once they got in the war. That's another story.
Yeah. That's a great question. And in fact, I don't think we've really done a program really diving into World War I yet. We've done the Doughboy, like the soldier's experience, but which is a great program. But yeah, that's another. It's just these topics are endless.
I know.
It's not all of everything that ever happened.
Exactly.
We should start an entire series just called Glen Rants About Wilson.
Yes.
Volume 4.
Yes. Right. What would
Public policy.
Marie? What would your ranting series be about? If Glen's
It has to be specific.
Is
it has
Wilson?
to be very specific.
Yeah. What would you just want to just go dive in and say, look,
and complain about and tell people how dumb something is.
Oh, corsets don't kill people.
Corsets don't kill people.
People didn't strangle themselves on purpose.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, that is such a misconception that I totally was. Yeah, I thought the
Corset
same
scenes
thing.
in movies are the worst.
Oh yeah, right. It's like it just has to be.
They all
there.
hold on to a bedpost and they all yank.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
It happened in Gone with the Wind. It happened in Meet Me in St. Louis. It happened in the another one that I'm thinking about. It happens in Bridgerton. It happens in Titanic.
It's a trope.
It's a trope, and I hate it.
Oh man, we'll make fun of it sometime. We'll do a skit about it.
Yes.
All right, so let's see. We got time for maybe one or two more questions. Now I see, Amy, I think we may have kind of answered your question on accident in a way, because we were talking about, Amy asked, do you feel media portrayal affected American sentiment and involvement in Vietnam?
Yes.
I think we covered that pretty thoroughly, but thank you for the question, because it is a great one. Now, Brian asks if we are familiar with S. Brian Wilson. He was he was a Vietnam veteran, a peace activist, a trained attorney. Are y'all familiar with him?
I do not know that name.
Oh, I see. So we finally got you stumped. I can finally use the stupid little graphic I made.
How long have you had that one in your back pocket?
Oh, I've had it ready for months. So Brian,
good about that. It took us
yeah,
months.
Congratulations, Brian. You have stumped us. But let's just go to good old Wikipedia for a second. And I gotta actually get the page up. Whoops. So let's go back to our friends. All right. So
I know the Beach Boy Brian Wilson, but not S. Brian Wilson.
Now, it seems that, let's see, he left the Air Force as a captain. He served in combat during Vietnam, and he's a member of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, Veterans for Peace. So he might be someone that we'll come across if we go into those protests and activism due to the Vietnam War. So I'm sure we'll cover him, but thank you for throwing that in there. Brian says he is alive and well, living in Nicaragua. Interesting. Very cool. Ooh, that'd be so neat. Maybe
that's another aspect to domestic stuff in Vietnam is that early on, at least, there were maybe not pro-war, but pro-America involvement in Vietnam rallies that were at least as big as the anti-war rallies.
Really? Wow.
Up until like 67.
68.
Yeah, early part of
Probably when that
'68
ended.
when Tet hit, those kind of went downhill. But they were there, right? They were there,
But it wasn't as much pro-Vietnam as it was just pro-America.
right? And
And
yeah,
what all that kind of means, which generally is a lot of militarism.
Yeah.
well, it's not militarism. It's
Nationalism.
nationalism.
right? Which could
Which coincides with militarism.
No, it
Sometimes.
doesn't.
Sometimes.
Not
well, hold
automatically.
on. What are we talking? What is militarism?
Like, yay, military.
Okay. So.
Which does sometimes go with nationalism, but doesn't always have to.
Yeah.
Well, militarism is the idea that the military is the highest, best form of social structure in any nation state, and that the military should always be given precedent in budget, policy, and say in government, domestic, and international affairs.
Oh, okay.
We're not quite there.
Yeah. Right.
We're not
That's
quite.
But I could see how militarism and nationalism would have some crossover at
There's
least
yeah.
culturally for sure. But perhaps that's another time to debate that with our definitions today. But Brian also says that he and so let's see, this was, I've already lost the name. Oh, S. Brian Wilson protesters were run over by a train heading from Concord, California to Central America in 1987. That's interesting. Brian also says, so make sure you mention his third world legs. He was the one most severely injured by a train whose engineers sped up the train. That's fascinating. We'll definitely need to dive into that because I think there's so many stories of individual activists and protesters that are clearly fascinating.
That sounds like the pro-suffrage woman who jumped in front of the king's horse.
Oh yeah,
It's like
Emmeline Pinkerton.
don't do that.
yeah. Don't jump in front of
Don't
trains
jump
or
in front of
horses.
horses. Don't jump in front of trains.
Now I think we'll have to end with okay, so Karen asks for our last question, and don't worry Josh, I've got your what if for next time. But Karen asks if we've ever done a program on the origins of football. Oh, interesting, you should ask. Marie actually has a great program and a great podcast about the origins of University of Georgia football, but the sport itself we have not done a program on.
The UGA one does, of course, touch on the creation of football as UGA develops their own team, but we do not specifically go into the origin story of football itself.
Yeah, and Karen also mentions maybe touching on the first Super Bowl and how that got started. So, yeah, I mean, given that we are the Northeast Georgia History Center, I think just football at large would be a fascinating topic. So thank you, Karen. Now, before we head out today, I did want to share our upcoming events and everything that we have going on. We did mention our homeschool day earlier, but the next event we have is our Valentine's Day tea, which Marie will be leading and hosting. And our 11 a.m. has already sold out, but on Saturday, February 11th at 2 p.m., if you're in the area, then this is going to be such a fun event and program. Marie's going to be talking about the history of Valentine's Day, and of course there will be a lovely variety of teas and treats. You'll get to learn a little bit of tea etiquette, and this includes admission to our exhibit. So if this is also a great chance to see our special exhibit with the NC White photography studio, our fashion exhibit, the White Path Cabin, so a lot to see at the History Center, of course. Now,
and there's only 10 slots left in that.
That's
one.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
At
it's
the 2
filling up.
p.m.
At the 2 p.m. Yeah, the 11 sold out. 2 p.m. There's only 10 slots left. So.
Yeah. Now, our next forum, and I should say for Valentine's Day, this is great for ages 8 and up, and you can visit our website for more information on that. Now, we also have a forum. This is a lecture series that we have, and or a presentation series, and this is going to be with author and historian Dr. Ann Tucker, who has a fascinating book, The Newest Born of Nations, European Nationalist Movements and the Making of the Confederacy. So how did European nationalist movements kind of influence the creators of the Confederacy? Dr. Ann is Dr. Ann Tucker is going to present on this on Tuesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. So if you want to be a super nerd, then please join us for that. That's going to be free for members, but just $5 for anyone else who is not a member. And if you are a digital member, this will be filmed and available for you afterwards. Now, we also have a really great event on Saturday, February 18th with author and reporter Phil Hudgens. Now, I'm particularly interested in this because it has to do with the Dixie Mafia. Now, Phil Hudgens is a very well-known journalist in this area and beyond, and he had over 3 years of interviews with Ruby Nell Burt, who is the daughter of one of the leaders of the infamous Dixie Mafia. So to get those stories from her perspective, and of course Phil is an excellent interviewer, and really goes into the details of what the Dixie Mafia was like. I won't say any more because you gotta just hear these stories. So that is on Saturday, February 18th, and this is a free event, so we highly encourage you to visit us then. And then last but not least, we have our homeschool day, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and that is all about daily life in medieval Europe. So that is for homeschool families. The program is included with admission, but of course, if you are a member, this is a free program for you. So lots coming up at the History Center. You can always check things out on our website. And again, we'll be back for another LoFi History next month. This is LoFi History takes place on the first Tuesday of every month. So we will see you again on March 7th. Oh, that's funny. It's February 7th, and we'll be back on March 7th. Wow. So that's fun.
Calendars work sometimes.
Yep. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and we so appreciate you joining us today. All right. Bye, everyone.